To our podcast, Raising Big. This podcast is an ongoing conversation between myself and my young adult son. We're ready and willing to talk about all the things families might experience in their lives and relationships, both as parents and young adults, from teens to 20 somethings, the good, the bad, and sometimes the ugly. In this episode, Cayd and I will be talking about what I wish I knew in my 20s. We know that people usually learn best from their own mistakes. However, I believe information and education are power. So, Biggs, you might want to stop multitasking and take a note or two. There are some things I really wish I had known in my 20s, things that would have made life easier and allowed me to give myself a little more grace. I could have adjusted my expectations and avoided running into some boulders on the road of life. If sharing this makes you think twice at some point in the future, this episode has done its job. Let's dive in. I'm Marcy, and I'm the mom.
I'm Cayd, and I'm her kid. Mom, I know you are a little bit of a ways past 20, and you've had a lot of years to learn about things and also kind of reflect on what life was like in your young adulthood. There are so many things that young adults haven't had to deal with, either in their teenage years that are going to come up or, just different obstacles that people in their 20s face. I feel like that's a very transitional kind of decade in your life. Yeah, however, there are a lot of people in their 20 somethings that are certainly going to get the opportunity in those coming years to explore those different opportunities, make those changes, and have new experiences. So today, I'd like for you to share some things that you wish you knew or understood in your 20s, or maybe things looking back that you would have done differently. Some things that you can kind of give advice to myself and other bigs who are in their 20s or maybe entering their 20s, or even people who are in their later 20s and kind of reflecting back on the past decade. So with that being said, I just like you to kind of name off and kind of have some conversations about things that you wish you knew in your 20s.
Yeah, so there's a bunch, but I picked 10 that I think have been instrumental as I'm now in my fifth decade of life in getting me to this point. So my first one is don't take life too seriously. So I was born a perfectionist. And my mom tells a story about how I came home from kindergarten with a red check mark on a paper because I had gotten something wrong and I cried for like an entire day. So this has been something I've dealt with my whole life. And so taking life very seriously, making sure that the decisions I'm making are the right one, making sure that I am being super responsible, like those thought patterns actually got me in a lot of spots where I was stuck or I stayed too long because I thought I had to, because I was taking life really seriously. And there was probably only one right way to do it, right? And
Mhm.
so I took life really seriously. And on that journey, I think I missed out on some of the joy. I definitely, and I'm still learning this, like I didn't have fun.
Mhm.
Like there's a difference, right, between fun and joy, but I was the serious one. I was the one making sure I got everything done, all the boxes were checked, and those things take a lot of time, right? And I could never set those things aside and just go have fun for the sake of having fun because there were things to do,
Mhm.
right? And I actually just heard two good friends of mine that are on another podcast talking this morning, and they were talking about how actually being busy and doing is actually a form of, you've heard of fight, flight, and freeze. It's a form of fighting.
Mhm.
The keeping busy is a form of fighting that our nervous system goes into. So I think taking life too seriously when things, bad things happen or things feel heavy, not being able to check out and go have fun, I think can really be detrimental to you. So that would be
Mhm.
my number one, is not to take life too seriously. What do you got to say about that,
For
Cayd?
sure. I think that's definitely important. It's something that I think I've benefited from you having that experience and kind of being able to reflect back on that, because I think I'm kind of in the same boat as you were in your 20 somethings. I've always kind of, like you said, been trying to perfect everything and make sure everything's perfect. And because, you kind of learned that lesson and then taught it on to me, I've learned, kind of like you said, not to take life so seriously and to sit back and really enjoy things in that moment and understand, everything doesn't need to be done perfect. And also that there isn't necessarily a true definition of perfect. We've had conversations about how I just believe that everything in your life has kind of happened for a reason. So, kind of like you talked about with the kindergarten, missing that grade, that, maybe even though it's, in the grand scheme of things, something small, you kind of, I'm sure, always kind of had that in the back of your mind. And then that pushed you to be successful in middle school and high school and then college and, get good grades, get a good job and,
Mm-hmm.
be successful in life. So, at least in that factor, a job isn't all encompassing of success. But I think that, it kind of pushes you for certain reasons. So I
Mm-hmm.
definitely agree. And I think that it's a good lesson to learn for sure.
Yeah, and there were times that I did have fun, especially in my younger years, like before I had kids, but it definitely was
Mhm.
not my default or something I did on the daily. And so I would encourage our listeners, both our bigs and their parents, to make sure that they have programmed some fun. If it can't be every day, if it can't be something daily, then how about something weekly or a couple of times a week that you can do? So, number one, don't take life too seriously. That brings us to number two, which is things will not go according to plan. So I am a master planner, which I have passed that on to Cayd. We are nerds. We used to go when he was a little boy, and we'd do our planners and Panera date every
Mhm.
January. And we are master planners. And you make those plans and they don't go according to plan. Like I just had a Facebook memory pop up in the first year that we lived in Kansas. We had planned to go back to Minnesota for Thanksgiving to be with our family. Well, weather popped up. And so we were not going to be able to drive to Minnesota. So the day before Thanksgiving, right, I pulled a turkey dinner out my rear end, right, by running to
Mhm.
Dillon's and buying our grocery store and buying whatever there was left. But things will not go according to plan. You think that you're going to get this certain job and then you'll get these promotions and this is the trajectory it will take. You think that you're going to find a significant other by a certain age and that you'd like to have kids by a certain time and that you'd like to be able to do XYZ, buy a house, whatever those dreams are that you have. Like, I'm not saying don't plan, like, and we'll talk about that a little more as we go on. You can plan, but you need to know things will not go according to plan. And so when that boulder drops on the road right in front of you, or whatever that might be, whatever that symbolism is for you, just remember, like, the universe, God, whatever you believe in, has a different plan for you.
Mhm.
And so you just have to take a deep breath. It is okay to sit and have a pity party for a few minutes and feel all those feelings. But then the path has changed, adjust our plan. So not
Mhm.
throwing the whole plan out, but so accepting things will not go according to plan. What do you think of that
For
one, Cayd?
sure. I think with that, again, kind of, I feel like this will be a common theme between all of them is that, I've kind of learned it from you, but, when things don't go according to your original plan, it's kind of like you said, it doesn't mean you throw the whole plan away or that, everything's just ruined and you're not going to get to your end goal. I think it's important to, if you're starting here and, your goal is here, whether it's to start a family or get in a relationship at a certain age or have a job or have a certain amount of money or whatever it is,
Mhm.
if this was the plan that you had at some point in time, there's going to be something that derails it. But that doesn't mean that then you don't get to your goal. It just
Mhm.
means you have a different path there. So I think just because it doesn't go according to your original plan doesn't mean that it can't go according to a plan. You just kind of need to adjust your plan.
For sure. And, I heard a quote within this last year. Actually, it was the book Worthy by Jamie Kern Lima. And it was rejection is God's protection. And I'm not necessarily super religious, but I am a spiritual person. And so remembering when what you had planned all of a sudden is no longer possible, right? You can't get around that boulder necessarily. You're going to have to
Uh-huh.
take a different path. That there's probably something that would have happened had the universe, God, whatever, allowed you to continue on your own plan, and you're being
Hmm.
redirected for a reason. So
Yeah.
that's number two. Things will not go according to plan. My number three was start saving for the future now. So this is one of those ones where I'm sure one or two people probably told me this along the path.
Uh-huh.
I wish I would have listened better, but I also am giving myself grace in knowing that I am actually the first generation expected to do financially worse than their parents. There had been a trajectory in American society where every generation tended to be a little better off than their parents. Didn't mean
Hmm.
necessarily a lot, but a little better off. But incomes had not kept up with costs. And so financially, right, this is a fact. You can look it up. Like those of us who are Gen X are expected to do worse than our parents. So I maybe didn't have the same capacity for savings that maybe my parents would have had because it's not like I ever bought a house like over my income level or ever drove fancy cars or ever like we just didn't live that lifestyle, right? And as a matter of fact,
Hmm.
one of the dreams on my list is to be able to go to Target and spend whatever I want without having to think about it, right? So that
Hmm.
tells you like where my level set is as far as, that would feel really good to me. But it also feels good to have some money in savings. And so one of the things I really pushed with you kids is the minute you got a job, you were saving 50% of your money towards tuition.
Mhm.
The minute you got your first big boy or big girl job, it was make sure you are investing in your 401k, at least up to the match that your company
Mhm.
gives you, right? And start that right away. So you're building a lifestyle, right? With that worked in, because that is something that I wish I either would have done, or at the time I told myself a story that I wasn't able to do it. And maybe that was true. I can't go back and redo it. Maybe it wasn't. But start saving for the future now is a big one that I have really pushed for you guys, because I don't ever want you, and I'm not in panic mode by any means, but if something were going to happen to Social Security, like my children would then be getting me parked in their driveway in a trailer. I have 3 kids, each 4 months out of the year, right? So start saving now for the future would be my number 3. Cayd, what have you learned about that, and how are
For
you
sure.
making changes going forward that I did not choose?
Yeah, I definitely think that's important. And again, along with everything else, and even as you mentioned, you've kind of made it a priority then for us to save and, be smart with our money and things like that and think about the future, which I think is something that, at least from what I see in my generation, something that is very common is a lot of people are starting to look more at, their retirement and saving for the future and investing and things like that, which I think kind of like you mentioned, that trickling effect of your generation is the first generation where you're expected to not do as well as your parents. So then I think a lot of the parents from your generation have realized that and pushed that onto their
Yep.
kids. And even just in my friend groups in social media, I know a lot of people talk about saving and investing and things like that. And we've had a whole podcast episode about money management and things like that. But I think it's important just to save for the future and understand how important that is now, and how that can affect you, especially when you look at things like compounding interest and things like that. When you're 20, 21, 25, 30, it's easy to think, okay, I'm not going to be retiring until I'm 60, 70, or,
Mm-hmm.
however old it may be. So I've got, 40 years to save. But, even if you're just, saving $50 every paycheck or something like that, that all adds up and can definitely help you out in the future.
For sure. And for those people listening who have bigs who are on the littler end, right? Like we're talking the preteens, the early teens, it's never too early for them to start. So teaching them about savings, teaching them about that compound interest can start at that young age. And I think, when it came time to go to college, you guys were really, really happy that you had saved the
Uh-huh.
amount of money that you had, because most teenagers that have a job, they don't need 100% of their paycheck to just go blow. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
not something they need. So I do remember when your brother first graduated from college and then went right on to his master's. But when he got his first job and was paying for his first apartment and all of that, he was like, how am I still supposed to save 50%? And I was like, oh, no, no, no.
Uh-huh.
When you are actually living on your own, like you can't save 50% when you're living on your own, unless you're one of those few that comes out of college earning a lot of money with
Uh-huh.
no student debt, right? But so then it kind of came that, okay, maybe your target needs to be
Mm-hmm.
10% or whatever that might be. But
And I think
it's a
that's
temporary thing to do
Yeah,
50%.
and I think that's in a way good, because it's like you go from, us having to save 50 per half of our paycheck to now, okay, now I only need to save 20% or 10% or $100 or however, depending on how much you're making, what your rent is, things like that. I think that transition is almost a little easier, rather than if you start off, your high school job or your job in college or whatever, and you're just, spending whatever you want. And then all of a sudden you get to become an adult and it's like, oh, now I need to contribute to my 401k, or I need to save for a car or for an emergency fund or
Mm-hmm.
things like that. I think it's easier to kind of start off aggressive and then back off and be like, okay, instead of, if you get $1,000 paycheck, instead of saving 500 of it,
Right.
I can save 200 of it. And that just to me is a little bit more easily digestible than having to go
Yes.
from, okay, I get $1,000 every 2 weeks, to then now all of a sudden I have to start saving money and things like
Yeah.
that. So
I tricked you into thinking you're getting a raise, right? Now I have
exactly.
to save so much.
It's kind of like when tax season comes around and you get a tax return and you feel like you made money, but really you just gave them your money for the year and they're giving it back. But it works.
Yeah. So number 3, start saving for the future now. Number 4 is some people come into your life only for a reason or a season. So I am a very highly relational person. Like I love my people hard. I love them, good, bad, or indifferent, right? Like, and the lesson I had to learn that Just because someone is in your life now doesn't mean they will always be. And that is okay. Like
Mhm.
they may have come into your life to teach you a lesson. They may have come into your life to share some experiences with you. They may have come into your life because it was the mom who sat next to you at all the soccer games, and then the soccer games are over and your relationship
Mhm.
doesn't continue. Maybe they were your work BFF and you were going to talk to them forever, and then you leave work and you no longer keep in touch. Now I have
Mhm.
kept pretty much one or two friends from every place I've ever worked that I keep in touch with, and the people who you thought, oh my gosh, I can't imagine myself not talking to them all the time. Sometimes this is friends, like especially when you're moving from
Mhm.
high school to college. Like you can't imagine your life without all of your BFFs from high school, right? And there's all the big ugly cries on the last day of
Mhm.
school when you're all together, right? And then you get to college and you meet a whole new group of friends and you come home and you might hang out with some of your friends, but as time goes on, you keep in touch with
Mhm.
fewer people that you were familiar with in
Mhm.
high school. Same thing with college. Like some of those people will be your lifelong friends. Some of those people may not. When you move into a neighborhood, like some of those neighbors, when you move away or they move away, you might keep in touch with, and some you might not. Some of the people you date might be in your life forever, and some of them might not. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn because I get attached to people. And so I'm like, okay, they're going to be in my life and they're going to be here forever. And while I probably still love those people, loving them from a distance, and it's kind of a bless and
Mhm.
release type of thing, right? Like they can go on and live their life, and I am okay with that. And I am grateful for the fact that they were in my life for a season or a
Mhm.
reason for whatever we experienced together and however we went on. And that being said, this can be friends, this can also be family. And I know there are a lot of people, especially around, a holiday time where they're spending more time with their family, their birth family, the family they were born into than they normally would. And for some people, those relationships are very, very complicated. And often I am coaching primarily women through how can I make a different choice for myself that honors my feelings and my wishes and my joy for the holidays. Um, because family by birth doesn't always mean they are your chosen family.
Mhm.
Sometimes they're found family, right? Which typically is in the form of friends that you build really strong relationships with, and they would be there at the drop of a hat, and you're not related by blood.
Mhm.
So, whether it be your friends, your family by birth, or your found family, just know that those things and those relationships can shift and change. So, thoughts about that, Cayd?
For sure. I definitely think that that is 100% true and something that I struggle with too. Just because sometimes, kind of like you talked about with coworkers or, friendships, relationships, things like that, you get such a close bond and it's hard to kind of pull away from that. If you have been working with a coworker for 3 years or 5 years or even a year, you're seeing each other every day. You're maybe going to lunch together. You're taking your breaks together. You're, complaining about the workplace drama, whatever it may be. So you go from having that close connection. I know some people see their coworkers more than they see their family or than they see their best friends or things like that. So then, that can be a hard transition to go from that and kind of understanding, okay, they were in my life for that season of while I was working there. And like you said, there's some coworkers that, that friendship maintains after you leave a job. And sometimes that relationship changes. Sometimes it goes from hanging out every weekend to hanging out once a month. And then it's just whenever you guys are in town or things like that. And same thing with family, romantic relationships, friendships, all of that. I think sometimes you can try to force the relationship to continue, whether that's family or anything. But I think eventually it kind of just naturally plays out that it's not
Mm-hmm.
going to work out. And in a way, I'm kind of a firm believer, and you kind of have to keep giving if you want to, and the other person is open to it, if the situation is right, you have to keep almost kind of giving that chance because if you
Mm-hmm.
just pull away without truly understanding that that person was in your life just for that period of time or to teach you this lesson or you know for this reason whatever it may be, I think if you don't understand that, that just makes the struggle even harder because then you're wondering, okay, me and my cousin were once so close and now we're not close anymore and I just don't know what to do, or me and this boyfriend or girlfriend didn't work out and I just don't know what to do
Mm-hmm.
anymore. But if you understand, okay, dated this person because I needed to understand, what I don't like in a relationship, or I needed
Mhm.
to date this person to understand what I do like, or different things like that. I think when you truly understand that reason or that season of
Mhm.
why they were in your life, it just makes it easier and kind of takes away that, because it's not a good feeling to say, oh,
No.
I really hate, I wish how close me and my siblings once were, or whoever the relationship is.
Mhm.
But if you understand that reason, it to me makes it a little more digestible. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's easy if someone does you wrong, right? Like it is very easy to let go of them. It's
Uh-huh.
those relationships, right? That you maybe just have a difficult conversation because it's not working out, or you're just going to let them fade into the background, which that is perfectly acceptable as well. Especially with friendships, a lot of times they just kind of you just become less
Hmm.
available, right? And it just kind of fades into the background, and that's okay because you don't have to depend on the other person to give you closure. You can give yourself closure on a relationship, and like you said, like you need to understand what that reason is or what that lesson was, or be just sit in gratitude for the experiences you
Hmm.
had or what you learned about yourself, whatever that is. So it's not necessarily that you don't love them anymore, although if it's someone who showed you their true stripes and you've decided that they're not the type of person you want in your life, it is okay to have those icky feelings about that person and to just let them go along on
Hmm.
their way and go make someone else miserable, right? They're
Yeah.
not your problem anymore. That is okay too. But just knowing, again, number four is that some people come into your life only for a reason or a season, and
For
you don't have
sure.
to hang on to them forever. I'm speaking to myself. But number five, the story other people tell you is not their reality. So I think we spend a lot of time comparing ourselves to others. And I tell people this all the time. It's like when they come at me with, well, I'm seeing or I'm thinking about how everybody else has XYZ, right? They've got their finances in order. They're having this beautiful family holiday. They're making all this money. They're driving this nice car, living
Uh-huh.
in this house, taking these vacations, whether it's on social media or it's things your friends are telling you sitting across the table at a restaurant, and sometimes even what your own family members are telling you, right? People aren't always 100% truthful about the down and dirty negative stuff, right?
Hmm.
Unless you have a truly deep soul level relationship with that person and you're sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly with that person. Like if you ask Cayd knows every time that there's something good,
Uh-huh.
bad, dirty, ugly in my life, right? Like, and so like I feel I could go to him with anything. There's no shame, there's no disappointment, and
Hmm.
it's because of the fact that we've walked a lot of road together, right? Like we've done life together. So, and I have a few people in my life that I know the dirty about their life, right? I
Hmm.
know how much they're suffering, but those relationships are rare. So I think it's important not to compare yourself to other people's version that they are choosing to share with you about their life. So
Hmm.
whether that's on social media or that's something someone's telling you, just reassure yourself and know that that is not the full story. You might think things are going fine. You might think, oh my gosh, they have such a beautiful relationship. Like, I wish I could find a relationship
Hmm.
like that. When in fact, behind closed doors, things look very, very different. So, and it's not because people are being intentional about hiding that stuff. It's just that it's very,
Hmm.
very difficult to trust in other people enough, to be vulnerable enough to show up as your fully authentic self. That is a development piece that people have to actively work on in order to be willing to share at that level with other people.
For
So
sure.
the story other people tell you is not their reality. What do you think of that, Cayd?
For sure. I think this is something that, and I can't, speak when you were in your 20s, but from my perspective, it's something that people in their 20s in this day and age struggle with more, just because, kind of like you mentioned about social media and just everything is out there. I think, kind of back in when you were in your 20s, it was more just like you said, of what your friends told you when you went out to dinner or
Mm-hmm.
things, or what you heard through the grapevine. And it was, kind of people in your community or in your circle. Versus now, I can look at people all over the country, all over the world, all different, financial levels, all different socioeconomic
Mm-hmm.
classes, and compare myself to them. So I think that that makes it a little bit harder. But I think one thing that has kind of helped me with this lesson is understanding that you're seeing a part of their life. So if
Mhm.
you're, looking at someone on social media and, they are sharing about how great their relationship is and, they're so happy with their partner and they're getting married and they're blah, blah, blah. And, maybe you're thinking, oh, I wish I had a partner like that, or I wish I was getting married, or
Mhm.
whatever you're kind of hoping for that they have. I think it's important to understand that they might have some sort of health problem that you don't have to worry about, or they might not be doing well financially and you're doing well financially, or that just kind of interchanges everything. If you see someone who has a brand new car and a brand new house and is going on all these expensive trips, they obviously are making a lot of money, but maybe they're working 70 hours a week and they're miserable at their job, and this is just the few times a year that they go on vacation, versus
Mhm.
you might not make as much, but you enjoy going to work every day. You do something you're passionate about. So I think that it's important to understand. And I think there probably are people out there who, have a majority of their life great, but for a majority of people, it's usually a couple things that are
Mhm.
going really well, and then there's something else. Nobody's life is perfect. So I think that's important to understand when you're comparing yourself, is to understand that just because they have the money or they have the relationship or they have the education or they have the clothes or whatever it is that you are
Mhm.
looking at, they also might be looking at you and saying, oh, I wish I had all the free time that they have, or I wish I was able to relax like they do, or different things like that. So I think that's just something important to consider.
Yeah, and a couple of things you hit on, Kate. I think it's true that our ability to look at people in other countries and what their lives look like, I think for me
Mm-hmm.
especially, that's not something I had visibility to unless I was like reading a novel that was written in current time or whatever,
Uh-huh.
I that was not a thing on my radar when I was in my 20s. And now it's like even in my 50s, like I look at people who have made different choices to like move to different countries for different reasons, or to go live on a boat and float on the ocean for a year, or to live in an
Uh-huh.
RV and travel the country. Like I I didn't know what it was like for people to live in Portugal or Switzerland or Australia. And now that I have friends globally, right, that I can talk to about, oh my gosh, how does life look different in Canada? How does life look different in Mexico? Like, very, very interesting for me how my mindset has changed about the dream, right? And what everybody strives for in America, about how, oh my gosh, that is totally American and it looks
Uh-huh.
totally different everywhere else. So that global thing, I think, is really important for us to understand, especially those of us who are a little older. And I think there's also a generational component. I grew up with a family that, like, you didn't talk about politics. My sister and I were just talking about this. You didn't talk about politics. You didn't talk about money. You didn't talk about, there were just your health. Like, there were certain things
Uh-huh.
you just didn't talk about. And generation grew up not knowing a lot about
Uh-huh.
either their family genetics or, finances and how to do it correctly, or politics, things like that. Now, do I think the pendulum has potentially swung way too far the other direction, where people feel entitled to try to badger and bully everybody else into thinking and believing like they do? Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Do I think there's a middle spot we'll get to? I do. And I
Yeah.
think we'll talk in another podcast about your generation, but I have seen that already. Like, one of the lessons I had to learn is that people need to earn the right to hear my story. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't tell everybody, but unlike generations before me, I do feel okay talking about those things that were taboo topics or hidden topics or things you just didn't talk about. I do feel okay talking about those things with the people who have earned the right to hear my story.
For
So
sure.
I think we've kind of come back to the middle on that one. So there's some oversharing, right, that goes on, and I think I'm already seeing on social media kind of the tamping down of that a little bit. And I don't know if you're seeing that in what you pay attention to on socials.
Uh-huh.
Um, but it just seems like there tends to be a little bit more, not a version of my life, which we've talked about, but share selectively with the masses,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm not going to put only pretty things on my social because I want people to know that life doesn't always look like that. Like when I had frozen shoulder last year, I posted a picture and a whole post on Instagram about, just so you know, my life doesn't look right. And
Mm-hmm.
sharing some of those pieces makes other people feel seen and heard. So, I just think that really, number five, the story other people tell you is not their reality. It's just important to remember when you get in that
Mm-hmm.
comparison game, right? So that would bring us then to number six, which is perhaps the most important. Why I made it number six, I don't know. It was just shooting off the cuff. But number six is love yourself first. So, as a female of my generation, I think we were trained, conditioned, expected by society to put everyone before ourselves, whether that's messaging that we got in our education, whether that's messaging we got from our families of origin, whether that's messaging we got from society, from our church, no matter what that is, that, oh, well, you're going to, take care of your significant other, you're going to take care of your house, you're going to take care of your children, you're going to take care of your friends, you're going to take care of your ailing parents. Like, that's your role, right? And oh, by the way, work full time. And so what that has led to for a lot of women of my generation is a rediscovery in their 40s and 50s about how to love themselves first, and that if they don't truly love themselves first, they can't adequately love everyone else. And that is a tough realization to come to. Like, oh, you mean I wasn't really loving my children when I was putting their needs before my own? Like, they tell you for a reason on an airplane to take your oxygen first, right? Before you put that mask on your kid. And so I've equated that with pretty much everything in my life, and realizing that if I am at the bottom of my list and not at the top of my list of people that I want to care for, that I don't have the reserves. I don't have the capacity to meet them where they're at and to truly love on them the way in which they need to be loved. So loving yourself first could look like physically taking care of yourself, dealing with your health issues, getting your exercise, taking care of your nutrition. It could look like making sure that you have time to read, to journal, to meditate. It could look like making sure, I remember there were times where I'm like, oh my gosh, it has been 10 months since I have had a haircut, because I just didn't put that at the top of the priority list. But had you guys all had your haircuts? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And so had the dogs that had whatever they needed. And, so it's making sure that you are getting your needs met in whatever capacity that looks like. It can mean things like a retreat. It can mean travel. It can mean, going and getting a pedicure. But it can also mean that half hour of silence in the morning with your coffee and a journal, and just getting yourself what I call back to factory settings, right? So loving yourself first, Cayd. What's your take on that?
For sure. I think it's important. And kind of like you touched on, I think it is very hard to love other people or support other people through what they're going through, whether that be, relationships, family, friends, if you don't love yourself first, if you're not taking care of yourself first. I think some people can, power through it, but in my mind, a lot of people then hit a wall at some point where they
Mm-hmm.
realize they're giving too much to other people
Mm-hmm.
and not giving enough to themselves. And I know, and when we're kids, you hear a lot about like, filling up other people's buckets or things like that. But I've come to realize that you shouldn't be taking out of your bucket to fill other people's bucket. What
Ooh.
you're filling other people's bucket should be overflow. Like your bucket should be full to the top, and then as it starts to drip down, you're able to support those other people and kind of help fill their bucket. I think if because it just I mean, if you think about it, if you have two glasses and you're pouring out of yours into other person, they're going to get better, but then you're just
Mm-hmm.
like you're going to in some way or another end up getting hurt from it. And then whether that looks like then they're pouring back into you and then you have to pour back into them. It's just kind of like a over it's just a
Mm-hmm.
cycle that kind of never ends. So I think that's something important to realize is that you really do have to love yourself first and just in general take care of yourself first in order to be there for others.
That is some beautiful imagery. I don't know why you've never shared that with me before, or maybe it just entered your brain magically right now, some divine download. But I love that idea of your bucket needs to be full, and what you're giving to other people is actually the overflow,
Mm-hmm.
so that you are never getting in a state of being depleted by filling
Mm-hmm.
someone else's bucket. So I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing that, Kate. That's like the
For sure.
the quotable
That
idea
just
of the
it
day.
just
So
popped into my head. So
yeah. So little aside, I call those divine downloads, when like all of a sudden some words of wisdom just like pop into your head and come out your mouth, and you had given it zero thought, right? Like it just enters your head. So somebody out there needs to hear what Cayd just said, and that's the reason why that divine download just popped into his head. So that was number six. Love yourself first. Number seven, know what you hold sacred and protect it. So when this evolved for me, what I really held sacred, which I was doing it in weird ways, but like I enjoy my time alone. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't love being around my people. I love being around my people. They exhaust me. I am an extroverted introvert. So I can go out in public and I can present as someone who is very engaged. I'm very comfortable. You could put me in front of 10,000 people in an auditorium and I would be fine. But then I get to the end of the event and I am completely depleted and I need to go be by myself. And when I had a house full of littles and was working in a job where there were 200 employees in the facility, everybody was needing something at some point in time, there was millions of visits to this facility in a calendar year, and I would come home and I was already completely tapped out, and then my people were all needing something and I was not holding any time during the day for myself as sacred, right? So something I have learned is that that needs to be at the top of my to-do list, because I go through the day much better if I have held sacred to my time alone than if I get up and I just start doing. And so for me, one of the things, I have a list of things that I hold sacred. My children are one of them. My relationship with my husband is another. Taking good care of my pets, keeping in touch with my extended family, like things that I hold sacred. You notice not one of those was like a clean house, right? Not something I hold sacred. It still gets done, but it's not sacred. But knowing that I hold sacred, staying with the example I gave of having that time to myself over the last couple of years, that has become a priority for me. And when I do it consistently, I am a different human being than I am when I just let it kind of go to the side. So I hold that sacred and I am going to protect it by scheduling accordingly. Also, when this kind of comes into play, is if you are working and you are also raising a family, right? Holding sacred my children, right? That always came first. And if I ever would have had anyone at a job tell me, I'm sorry, you can't take care of your sick child, right? Because you need to be at XYZ for work. Now, I was blessed. I had great bosses, great supervisors. And there were times when Cayd broke his arm in first grade. We were leaving for Minnesota in 2 days for the Christmas holiday, right? I had a lot to do. We also at work had a big project that was supposed to roll out before I left town. I walked into a meeting when I got the call from the school that Cayd had a broken arm, and my boss looked at me. Shout out to Jay Buckmaster if you're listening. I walked into that room and he's like, get your stuff and go home. We've got this. And so that was always what I inspired to be for people that reported to me, as people who are like, when I needed to take care of my kid, I was going to take care of my kid. Now, I was blessed because my boss acted that way. Had it been something different, that would have been a deal breaker for me. And I don't quit things easily, but that would have been a deal breaker for me. So I hold taking care of my kids sacred, and it is something that's not negotiable for me. So knowing what you hold sacred, sit down and make that list. And like, you have to have rock solid boundaries around those things. And when you hold something sacred, that means you don't sacrifice it, not for anybody or anything. Cayd, thoughts on holding something sacred and then protecting it?
For sure. I think that that's important. And it kind of goes back into what you said earlier about loving yourself first. If you don't take care of yourself and do those things that you hold sacred, you're not going to be able to successfully go and do your job or have successful relationships or, just be a kind person. And I think it's important to understand too that that looks different for everyone. And you have to understand what that is for you. Like you kind of talked about, you like to spend your mornings journaling and stuff like that. That sounds like the worst way to spend my morning. Like, that is not what I want to do. But I would like to wake up early and go to the gym and, listen to music and just kind of spend that time, even though I'm around people, kind of with myself and just doing something that betters myself. And that's not something that you enjoy doing. You don't want to wake up at 5 a.m. and, get up and go to the gym when it's 26 degrees outside. So I think that it's important to understand, though, that everyone has their thing of what they hold sacred and what helps them get to that point. And then, we can kind of both go do our own things. And then as far as our relationship goes, as far as mother and son, then we're able to come together and have a better relationship, whether that means just communicating better throughout the day, or if we are cooking something in the kitchen together, or if we're recording the podcast, we're better doing that versus if there's a morning where you don't do your journaling, I don't go to the gym, and we come record this podcast. we're probably not going to be focused. It's not going to be as good as we wanted. You know, it's not going to be as productive because we're not in that headspace. We haven't done that thing that we hold sacred. And I think it's important to prioritize that too. Kind of like you mentioned, there's been times where I have woken up, if I have something to do at, in the morning, I will wake up extra early in order to go to the
Mm-hmm.
gym and then do whatever I need to do in the morning. Or if I have something early in the morning, I'll go to the gym late at night, or I'll go to the gym on my lunch break at work, or whatever it is. But that's something that I hold sacred and something that I enjoy doing. So I think that that's important to just kind of prioritize that.
Yeah. And important to respect the fact, right, that everybody's things that they hold sacred are different.
Mm-hmm.
And that you don't have to explain yourself. You don't owe anyone an apology. And that if someone has asked you to do something that requires you to sacrifice what you hold sacred, no is a complete sentence. You do not have to come up with anything after the word no and a period, And so that holding something sacred, that's enough. Just the fact that it's sacred to
Mm-hmm.
you, right? And if you feel like you need to explain yourself, you could just say, you know what? I hold my gym time sacred and I'm not willing to compromise that. If somebody has a bad response to you saying that, that is their issue, not your issue. And you can let
Mm-hmm.
them own that. So know what you hold sacred and protect it. Good thing to spend some time reflecting on. Number 8, ask for help. So I spent a lot of time growing up not asking for help. And this is something that I think is common in women of my generation, especially women of the previous generation to me. You just didn't ask for help. You just pushed through and got it done. And you had to be at total overload, overwhelm, breakdown mode before you would even allow anyone. And then they were probably going to do it wrong most of the
Mm-hmm.
time. And so, and I've been in situations too where like people, whether it's on the job front or, a family gathering or, something like that, where something comes up and the person won't ask for help, they won't accept help, but then they want to play the martyr, right? And it's like, after the fact, after they get through it all, well, I did it all on my own. I didn't have any help. You have to be willing to ask for help when you need it. And I have had to work to get to this point. And so when I ask for help, my people kind of know that are in my circles. They know that this is something I've had to work on. So if I am asking them for help, it's because I truly need it. It's not because I don't want to do something myself. It's not because I'm lazy. It's because I truly need their help. And so people have shame around having to ask for help and not being able to do things. But I really would challenge you to sit and look at, where did that expectation come from, that it is not okay to ask for help, because we are not meant to do life in isolation. We are meant to do life in community, and helping each other is part of that, and not
Mm-hmm.
having to do things solo. So asking for help, Cayd, how good at that are you?
Not very good at all. Something that I definitely struggle with. And you brought up a point of, you said something along the lines of, if you do ask for help from someone, they're going to do it wrong. And that's something I've experienced a lot in my life. And I think has kind of fed into that, I guess, instinct of not asking for help,
Mm-hmm.
because there's just been so many times, whether it is personal life or school or professionally or whatever, where you ask for help and either it doesn't get done at the time when you need it done, or it doesn't get done
Mm-hmm.
right. And then you have to go and redo it. And I think sometimes it's just, I'm the kind of person, like, I will be the first to admit I am not a team player at all. Like, I would much rather just do it myself. Like, so many people pride themselves on teamwork. That is not something I am good at. Whether it is working on a project in school, or like, I have a group project right now, and it's the thing I've hated most about school. Like, I would rather do the whole entire project by myself, just because it's just easier. Not say that that is okay. That's something that I definitely need to work on, but asking for help is definitely not something that I'm good at, but I do think that it is needed. And I will ask for help from
Mm-hmm.
time to time when I do, kind of like you said, genuinely need it and I'm, desperate, for lack of a better word. But I think that it is important to understand that, it's okay to ask for help. And I don't view it as it's a problem to ask for help, which that is where I
Mm-hmm.
think really kind of the negative side of not wanting to ask for help is. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking for help. I think some people think that there is something wrong with it, or it makes them weak, or it makes them incompetent, or whatever the situation is. But for me, that's not the case. It's just I prefer to do it by myself. But yeah, definitely something that I think is important to learn.
Yeah, and I've had to work at my communication around asking for help. Like we've both said that, we were born perfectionists and we've had to work on letting go of that. And
Mhm.
we say the phrase in this house, perfectly imperfect, a lot. But yet, like my husband, Cade's stepdad, he will load the dishwasher. Then I follow behind him and I fix it. And then Cayd comes in and he fixes it even better. And we do this on the
Mhm.
regular. Like almost every time that dishwasher is run, home.
Uh-huh.
There are three of us loading the dishwasher, right? And it just come out clean every time, but probably because it's three of us to get it right.
Uh-huh.
But we don't want to put it on Cayd to be the one to always load the dishwasher, even though like he wants it a certain way. But I've had to get better at communicating. If there's something I want help with, but I need it done in a certain way, I
Mhm.
really have to get specific about how I act about something. I have had to kind of release the timeline or learn to give a wider timeline. And this especially worked with my kids. I know a lot of parents struggle with, I need you to take out the trash and unload the dishwasher, right? In a lot of parents' minds, that means stop what you're doing right now and go unload the trash and do the dishwasher. They don't say
Mhm.
that, but that's what they're expecting. Their kid is like, okay, I'm gonna finish my 3 hours of video gaming
Mhm.
on this Saturday. And then I'm going to get distracted by playing with the dog. And then my friend's going to be texting me and I'm going to take care of that. And it's now 9 o'clock at night and I'm unloading the dishwasher, right?
Mhm.
And taking out the trash. So being specific about that communication, but also as a parent being like, sometime today I need you to, then they're not expecting you to do it immediately. Or
Mhm.
in the next 3 hours, this to happen. Because your kid doesn't stand a chance at meeting your requirements if you don't give them,
Mhm.
right? So I think that asking for help is something that has to be nuanced over time, but to realize there's nothing wrong with asking for help. And choosing to not ask for help, but then to play the martyr because you did it all is
Mhm.
also not okay. Like if someone with Cade's personality type that prefers to do everything themselves because it's just easier for him, if he were to then to turn around on me and say, I did this all by myself and you didn't help me at all, there's going to be words, right? We're going to
Uh-huh.
have a discussion. So yeah, just know asking for help, there is no shame in that, and be specific about how you're communicating that you need that help.
For
So
sure.
that was number 8. Number 9, you're not broken and you don't need fix, but you can always grow and develop into the highest version of you. So this one, I think for years, right? People are like, oh, if I struggle with perfectionism, if I struggle with depression, if I struggle with anxiety, right? I'm broken. I need fixed. If I am not good at being in committed relationship, if there's a million things, right? We could use as examples. And you're not broken and you don't need fixed. Okay. Because I think a lot of people run around feeling like crap because they've taken what society tells them. Oh, you should be this way, you should be that way. And everybody's life experience is different. And we all come through life. We're born with some tendencies, we inherit others, right? And we all come into situations and relationships with baggage. And so, your goal when you're trying to grow and develop into the highest version of you is not to necessarily fix those things, it's to
Mhm.
learn how to better handle those situations or how to mitigate your programming, right? Or to unbecome, which is something I learned several years ago. It was one of the very first things that I learned. It was Glennon Doyle, one of her first books that I read. And it was talking about how we a lot of times have allowed ourselves through the choices we've made, the things that we've done, the things we're tolerating, the things we've sacrificed, we become a version of ourselves that is not true to who we are. And so then we need to go through an unbecoming, which is unbecoming all the things we thought we were supposed to be or
Mhm.
thought we should be. And so that's that growth and development. And that journey is never done. Now, sometimes can you set it aside? Yes. So, like I have decided for the month of December, I'm not reading any personal growth books. I am only reading novels in December because my brain needs a break and I need some time to integrate everything that I've been learning and working on. Now, not everybody needs to go at it the way I am. This is something very that I have become very passionate about in the last 5 years is personal growth and development. And do I wish that every human really wanted to do it? Yes. Do I think we'd be better off as a world if people spent some time working on themselves? helping to learn about themselves, helping to learn better ways of communicating, better ways of doing things, ways to grow. Absolutely. But telling yourself you're broken and you need fixed and then continuing on your life like that is not going to get you anywhere. So whether you're moving at a snail's pace and something happens and you're like, okay, how could I deal with that differently next time? Or what is it about my programming that made me handle that in that way, right? Nobody wants to keep repeating the same miserable mistakes they make all through life, right? Life is going to continue to deal you crap. Like, that's just a fact. And you have to have, it's life is 50-50. You have to have the crappy stuff as well as the joy, right? You can't feel one without the other. So what are you going to do about that? And so that growth and development journey, again, whether you are a snail or you are the rabbit, right, running like crazy for the finish line, you're never going to get there, by the way. So running like crazy is not a good idea. Like, you can only consume and integrate so fast when you're trying to grow as a human being. But we all have a highest potential. And so I would encourage people to start in their teens and 20s at figuring out what that looks like. Like, you guys, my kids, and a lot of your friends, like, the words and the language and the things you understand and are talking about with each other right now is light years ahead. Like, I was in my 40s before I understood those concepts. So I think the next generation, whether it's because their parents have helped them to understand that or because they're seeking it out on their own, definitely, I think, believe in the growth and development of themselves as potential beings who have a lot of potential. So you're not broken, you don't need fixed, but you can always grow or develop into the highest version of you. Okay, thoughts
For
of the
sure.
big?
I think that it's important to understand, kind of like you said, you're not broken and there's nothing wrong with you. And it's not that you're wanting to fix things about yourself. It's just like you're looking to improve. The way I kind of view it is like if you're cooking something, it's kind of like you're not changing the base recipe, but maybe you're just adding an extra egg, or you're, doing 1 teaspoon of vanilla instead of 2 teaspoons of vanilla, or you're adding some pepper and taking away some, whatever it is. You're kind of, and that to me is just the journey of life is, you're learning, okay, I like, my food when it has this seasoning in it. And, I like my life when I am able to communicate this way and things like that. So I think it's important to understand that there's nothing wrong and there's no right way to behave or right way to act. Um, but you just have to go on a journey and figure out what works for you and what is best for your life and how you're able to reach your maximum potential. There's people who make it through life by, you know, just kind of always being at a steady emotional state. But there's some people who feel very high and very low emotions, but that is what works for them and that is how they get through life.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, people who cry at every minor inconvenience or cry when things are good or cry when things are bad, cry when things are sad, cry when things exactly. And then there's other people who maybe only cry once a year when they really, something really bad or really great happens. But it's not that one is right or wrong. It's just that that helps you process your emotions. And for the other person, that doesn't help them process their emotions. So it's just important to understand that you're just making improvements and changes and you're not, fixing something.
Yeah. So for those of you who are not watching on YouTube but are listening on Spotify or Apple, I raised my hand when Cayd was talking about the human being that cries at everything. That is me. I am a highly sensitive person. I am an emotional empath. Like, that's just who I am. And I'm not trying to fix that. There was a point in my life where I thought I needed. And I've since come to the realization that this is who I am. It's part of my magic. It's part of how I deal with the world. And I'm not going to try to harness my own empathy, right, towards what's going on in the world. Does it make my life more difficult sometimes? Absolutely. Does it make other people who are not so comfortable with their emotions a little uncomfortable sometimes? Or not? That's their side of the fence, so they can deal with that. But your story, your unique, as Cayd said, your base recipe, another divine download coming out of Cayd's mouth, but your base recipe is perfectly imperfect. Okay. And so take that base recipe and add the extra egg, right? That's what the personal growth and development is, the adding of the extra egg. So thanks again for that one, Cayd. Another quotable that you're on today. So that was number 9. You're not broken, don't need fixed, but you can always grow and develop to the highest version of you. You have a lifetime to do it. So number 10 is dream bigger. So this is something that I also had to learn. And I think people are under the assumption that if you have a dream to do something, you only get one. I would like to challenge you to know that dreams are unlimited and you can have a dream for today. You can have a dream for tomorrow. You can have a dream for next year. You can have a dream for your lifetime, right? Like my big dream is that I'm leading women's retreats at the ocean. Like that is my big dream. I have done a lot of work visioning about that, but I also have dreams for where I will be 3 years from now, 5 years from now. I
Mhm.
have dreams about where I'm going to be tomorrow on Thanksgiving or where I'm going to be, later today. Like I'm dreaming about how I want to feel when I've got everything ready for Thanksgiving and I'm able to take that time to sit down
Mhm.
and read a novel, whatever that might be. And there's a difference between wishes and dreams. So if you wish something, you're not necessarily going to actively do anything to make that happen. If you
Uh-huh.
truly have a dream of something happening, that requires you partnering with God, the universe, whatever that might be, and taking action to make that happen.
Mhm.
So easy when you're younger, like your big dream might be, and I'll use you as an example. Your big dream might have been when you were in eighth grade to be a dentist.
Mhm.
That was your big dream, right? And so you decided as an eighth grader you were going to graduate from high school a year early. Well, then as you went through high school, right, you still were on track to graduate a year
Mhm.
early, but you decided you didn't want to be a dentist, right? The dream changed, and dreams can change at any time. And then, you ended up going on to school, getting a business degree. And then the new dream was you wanted, right? And so you
Mhm.
took action to figure out how you wanted to do that. And you're doing that while you're working full time in an industry that you're really good at. And you have more dreams about you want to
Mhm.
be able to travel. And so I always encourage people to dream bigger. Like if they're like, oh, my dream is to have, I'll use another example from this last week. My dream is to have new appliances in my house. Okay. That's my dream. And then you take action steps to make it happen. Now, we had to make it happen because we had some things going on with some of our appliances, still useful, but not working correctly. And I very much am trying to practice a what am I tolerating and a no broke behavior attitude, right? So we try to make things happen when we can make them happen. And so it's okay to have dreams that take a little while. It's okay to have dreams that take a long while. And it's okay to have dreams that you can make happen right away. Like I have a list going for 2025 already of dreams. I don't like the word goals. I feel icky about the word goals because people try to turn it into a smart goal and it has to be measurable and it has to have a timetable in it. If my dream to have retreats at the ocean had a timetable, it would have happened 5 years ago. But
Uh-huh.
that's the limit I would have put on it, right? I would have been by
Mhm.
the end of the year, I'm gonna and then life deals you stuff, right? Like
Mhm.
an epilepsy diagnosis, like meeting a new husband, like a lot of life has happened in the last 5 years. So if I had set that goal, that wasn't gonna happen. But I have hit a lot of other dreams. Hasn't taken away my big dreams. So I would encourage kids, even if you have a dream for next year or 5 years from now, dream bigger. When you're looking at things you want to be able to say on your deathbed that you did, and I can guarantee you, you are not going to say, I wish I would have spent more time at work.
Mhm.
Okay. I guarantee you that's not going to be it. So that can be the focus for a lot of young 20 somethings is really trying to strive and climb the ladder. And I think that's
Mhm.
changed a little bit, Cayd, with your generation. You value things differently. And again, we're going to do an episode on Gen Z and what that looks like. But I want you to dream bigger. I just constantly challenge you. If you
Uh-huh.
have a dream to do X, how can you dream that bigger? And then how
Yeah.
can you dream it bigger again? Right. So what do you think about that, Cayd?
I kind of wanted to disagree with what you said at the very end there. Not because just because I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to spend more time at work and that being your dream. I think if you want to dream to be a CEO or to, be established
Mm-hmm.
in your career to make more money, that's okay. I think that is that personally for me or you what, our dream would be? No. But I think there are some people who are okay with, putting in 60 hours a week and sitting at the
Mm-hmm.
office from 5 a.m. until 8 p.m. and staying, late and working weekends. I agree with you. That is not my dream. I am not going to die wishing that I spent more time at work. And I know you feel the same way. But I think for some people, that is their dream. But I do agree with everything else you said about dreams and just that there's no maximum dream you can have or no,
Mm-hmm.
the way I think about it is there are so many crazy things going on in the world that like if, I'm not going to give specifics, but if certain people can have certain jobs, or certain people can come from nothing and be super successful. There's no dream
Hmm.
too big, everything is possible. And I even look at things like the fact that we can go to space. What is that? That sounds like such a simple thing of like, oh, what, we went to the space for the first time in like the 60s or something like that. Like, you would think that it's like, oh yeah, you just go to space. But think about people in the 1800s who probably dreamt
Hmm.
about going to space. And I'm sure people told them that was an impossible dream and things like
Hmm.
that. So if your dream is that you want to, start those women's retreats on the beach and things like that, there's probably going to be people who say, oh, that's, too big of a dream.
Hmm.
And maybe people have said that to you, but there's no limit to dreams. There's no limit to
Hmm.
what you want to do with your life, how successful you want to be, how you want to spend your days. But I think it's just important to find those dreams and, kind of like you said, understand that those dreams are going to change. Your dream when you were in your 20s is probably not the dream you had when you're
Hmm.
30s, is not like, I am sure when you were 20, you probably weren't dreaming about leading women's retreats on the beach. Like,
Nope.
that's not.
Was
And
nope.
I'm sure the dreams I have at 21 right now aren't going to be the dreams I have when I'm in my 50s.
Hmm.
But having those dreams and working towards them, even if it changes throughout your life, it still sets you on a better path. So, kind of like the example you brought up earlier, um, me wanting to become a dentist and wanting to start that career early and being able to have time to go to dental school, I decided to graduate high school a year early so that way I could just become more advanced. And even though that dream of becoming a dentist didn't happen for me, the steps I took still
Hmm.
got me to a better place in life. It still got me to be able to start my career earlier for the dreams that I now have. It taught me, hard work and time management because I was in accelerated courses and taking extra classes throughout high school that now I've been able to apply as I'm working full time and going to school full time. So I think understanding that those dreams are going to change, but that doesn't mean that you need to put them off or wait until, you have your final big dream. I think just
Right.
dream along the way. And like you said too, I love that you mentioned the little dreams. I think sometimes people
Hmm.
think like, oh, my dream needs to be how much money I'm going to have, or what, my final job is going to be before I retire, or things like that. But sometimes the dream is getting new appliances, or sometimes the dream is waiting for that, nice new bedding to go on sale that you've been thinking about buying, but it's just too expensive for you to justify it, or whatever it is. I think, just dreaming on all levels is super important.
It is, and I think that's kind of like the spice to life, right? When you
Mhm.
look at those things, and obviously the end game is that when you do die, when your life is over, right, that
Mhm.
you don't have regrets about not chasing your dreams, right?
Mhm.
Or not following your dreams. And, love the point that you made about if someone's chasing the CEO seat and they want to spend all that time at work and that is their dream,
Mhm.
that's great. With one caveat that they're not breaking rule number 7, which is know what you hold sacred and protect
Mhm.
it. So if work is their sacred thing, by all means. But if they are neglecting or sacrificing their sacred thing, which is time
For
with their
sure.
family, time with their friends, whatever that might be,
Uh-huh.
right? Then it's not okay. So we need to make sure that there's that balance there, because yes, there are people that
Mhm.
is their dream, and great,
Mhm.
chase that dream, but just don't be sacrificing yourself or your things you hold sacred
For sure.
in the process. I do think that, people are going to tell you that your dreams are too big when you try to dream.
Mhm.
And I know I dropped some names here of some people that I follow, read their books on social media. But Brene Brown talks about people who are in the arena. And if you go and you search that quote, it's actually a Theodore Roosevelt quote. But people who are not in the arena, and what I mean by that is people who are not chasing their own dreams, they don't get to have an opinion
Mhm.
about whether or not your dream is too big, right? Because they're not doing the work to chase their own dreams. And so, you don't have to listen to their opinion. They can think whatever they want, but I don't listen to them. Like someone who's going to say to me, you're never going to do that. I'm like, you know what? You're not in the arena. So
Mhm.
until you get in the arena, you can keep your opinion to yourself. Now, am
Mhm.
I saying that silently in my head?
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But if they're not in the arena, they don't get to
Uh-huh.
comment on the size of your dream, right? And I'm only having conversations about my big dreams with people that are in the arena.
Uh-huh.
So I have done the work to kind of cultivate my friend group, to cultivate the people I am in professional spaces with, to make sure that they are people that will honor everyone's right to dream and
Mhm.
to dream big. So if you're not in the arena, you don't get a vote. So number 10, dream bigger.
For sure. And
Those are my
one thing
10,
on
Cayd.
that, sometimes I think too, even if you are in the arena, their opinions shouldn't matter. I think,
Mhm.
I think sometimes you can look to people that are in the arena and, maybe either have similar dreams or have done what you're
Mhm.
dreaming, and you can kind of look to them for advice. I think that can be beneficial, but I think there are even sometimes people who have done what you're trying to do, and whether it be because they don't want competition in whatever that dream
Mhm.
is or things like that, or they might not think that you have the skills that it takes to do whatever it is. I think sometimes just the opinions of anyone doesn't matter, and if it's your dream,
Mhm.
it's your dream. Obviously, in an ideal world, would the people in your circle and the people you're closest to and love most support
Mhm.
you in your dreams? Yes, but is that always the case? No. But I think as long as you have that dream, that's all that matters. And
Yeah.
that's just the important part, is that it's your dream.
And that's when I invite them to leave the arena, right? Like if
Yeah.
they're
Uh-huh.
if they're one of those people, right? Then I go back to number 4, which is some people come into your life for a reason or a season.
Exactly.
And if the people in your circle are not supporting you in chasing your dream, because that's what I go to them for, is
Uh-huh.
support. And even to get them to ask me the hard questions. So it's not that they don't believe in my ability to do that. It's that I want them to ask me the hard questions that then might get me over the next hurdle, right?
For
To
sure.
to continue to be able to chase that perfectly imperfect dream, right?
Uh-huh. Yes, for sure. Well, thank you for sharing, Mom. I appreciated hearing it all and having the conversation and kind of comparing it to what I've already learned in my life, and then also what I know I'm working on to learn. But I know you've taken these things and, learned. I know you've taken the things that you've learned to heart, and I see that you acknowledge and you really take steps in those. And whether they're things that you learned recently or in a couple years or things that you're even still working on, you made sure that you taught them to us too as kids. And I think that that's been very beneficial to me in my 20s. I hope our listeners grabbed, one or two of these, maybe even all 10 of the things. I know that's a lot to absorb, but specifically just one or two. And even if, you don't take action on it right now, at least it hopefully plants a seed in the back of your mind that keeps that thought going. And maybe it can save you some struggle or some heartache down the road as you go through your 20s.
Excellent, Cayd. Well, thank you for being here with me today. And if you want to go ahead and close this out, I think we've covered our
For
topic
sure,
for
for
today.
sure. That is a wrap for this episode of Raising Bigs. We thank you all for listening today. We hope you found some takeaways, a fresh perspective, and maybe even an action step or two in this episode. Again, we are not experts, but we can authentically share what we're learning in hopes of making the path a little bit easier for those who are listening. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. Please subscribe and share with those in your circle who you think might benefit from hearing it. A new episode is released every single week on those platforms.
You can visit my life coaching website at marcyhawkinson.com or email me at lifecoachmarcy.com. I'm also on Facebook at Life Coach Marcy and Instagram on at life_coach_Marcy. Where can listeners find you, Cayd?
My handle across all social media platforms is at the Cayd Berrigan. That is where you can find me. The best way to contact us, whether you want to give us feedback or ask any questions, is to DM either one of us on social media or to reach out on the contact me page on my mom's website. Again, that is marcyhawkinson.com. We appreciate any feedback, topic ideas, or questions that you may like to share, and we will see you next time on Raising Bigs.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.